Hello, class. So I want to talk about a number of things. Here I have a PowerPoint, which basically goes over what I'm going to talk about, just like any other lesson. I will post these slides on Moodle. Actually, I think they already are posted, and you can access them there. Anyways, I'll just run through them really quickly, just to give you guys an idea of the things that I'm going to be covering in the future or ahead, like now. Okay, so we're going to concentrate on divs and spans, and we're going to basically look at various divs. We're going to talk a little bit about CSS, talk about the concept of cascading, CSS being cascading style sheets, inline and block elements, spans, links, inline versus block, so we'll take a look at that, lists. Okay, so there's just a little quick preview for you. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at some divs. Okay, so you've recently been introduced to the concept of divs, and I just want to show you the usefulness of this element. So if you look at any web page, and you can start to begin to see how things are divided up, or divisions, right? So here you can see this web page, for example, like we have this division up here, this top part. Right? You might even say this gray navigation bar is its own div, right? Here you have this side box right here, that's another div, and then this main area might be a div, which might be divided here, right, into this square in this area, and this square area here too. You might even say that inside this div, you have other divs. So here's another div inside this div. So basically everything can be arranged into divisions, right? Divs is just dividing your pages and arranging them, okay? If you want to take a look at another page very quickly, let's see if I can pull one up. Let's go to one of these. No, maybe not that. Yeah, even your Moodle page right here, you can see the side division, the main division, and then even in here, right, you see these boxes with many different things inside each box. Each box could technically be a div. I don't know how they programmed it, but that's definitely probably the approach. Every separate part is essentially a div. Okay, so get used to that concept, organizing yourself into various divs. You can name them div side section, div top section, div main section, things like that. Okay. Okay, so with that in mind, let's move on to some CSS. Okay, so I just want to go in your book here, and it talks about CSS. Now, there are ways of doing things in kind of a shortcut way in CSS. So if you recall, when we do things like padding and margin, we don't have to do the padding of all around an element. You can do like just the top or just the right or just the bottom. Okay, so, and you can specify them differently if you want. Okay, so if you want a lot of or no top padding, but more bottom padding, you can do that. Okay. Now a shorthand for that is you can do it all on one line. Okay. And there's a specific order for padding and margin, and it goes first starts with the top, and then it goes around, kind of like in a clockwise fashion, right? Top, right, bottom, left. So if you want, you can think start at 12 o'clock top and then go around. Okay. So you can do that all on one line, or you can divide them into its individual parts, just like we saw with doing borders. If you recall, when we did borders, you can either do it all on one line, or you can divide it into its three parts. I think it has it down here too. There it is, border. So border, I usually do border on one line, just because it doesn't really matter the order. So with borders, it doesn't matter the order. I can put thin, solid, and then color, or I can put color, solid, thin. That doesn't really matter. Okay. With margin padding, it does matter. So just remember it starts from the top and goes around. Other things you can do is you can specify just one value. If you specify one value, what it does is it uses that value for all around. Okay, so top, right, bottom, left, all get that value. Okay, so if you want all around the same, you can do that. Or you can specify two values, and what that does is the first value means the top and bottom are the same, and the second value meaning the right and left. Okay, so there's the equivalent. Okay, so order matters for those, whereas this doesn't matter. Okay, here in your book it says these are acceptable, but from my experience these cause problems. In my experience, you have to make sure you have all three values. If you're missing one of the values, for me, my border just doesn't show. Okay, so my suggestion, make sure you have all three. Other things you can do, background, but this is where my memory just kind of runs short. I use shorthand for border and padding and margin, but when it comes to background color, I usually just use the individual properties themselves, and I don't usually do the one-line thing for backgrounds. Same thing for fonts. I find it very confusing to try to memorize the order because fonts are kind of funny. Some things don't need to be ordered, whereas some parts need to be ordered. So it's kind of weird. So when I deal with fonts, I just deal with the individual property: font size, font family, line height, color, etc. Okay, so there you have shorthands for some of your CSS. Okay, so maybe you paused the video, had yourself a mental break there, digested that, maybe read in the textbook. But now I'd like to move on to another concept with CSS, cascading style sheet. So what's this concept of cascading? So cascade, waterfall, going top to bottom, okay? So when you start to deal with very large websites, you might have to link more than one CSS style sheet. Now, why is that? Okay, so imagine that you are a very big corporation like Coca-Cola. Okay, so Coca-Cola has websites all over the world, right? They have a website in China, a website in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing they probably want to do is have a very general style that they say for all websites all over the world. We're going to use, a red theme, so they might use red font colors in certain places. So that's going to be the same all throughout the world. However, let's say they have different divisions. So here they have beverage division, but let's say we have division by continent. So you have your Europe division and your Asia division. And let's say we discover that Europe prefers a certain type of font and Asia prefers another type of font. Okay, so in general, we have a font that governs everybody, but then we say, okay, we make a separate style sheet. So European division.css, we're going to define that they're going to use Times New Roman or whatever, whereas after applying the corporate one, for China, we have the Asian style sheet, which applies Arial or something like that, so that overrides the top one. Okay, and then you might even get even more specific. So in Europe, we find out that something like Germans don't see very well, so we need to have a bigger font size for the German website, whereas Spanish people see very well, and we can make the font smaller. So here in this one, we might have the Germany CSS, where we specify font size to be 14, and the Spanish one where we have font size 8 or something like that. Okay, so going for something that governs like everything, and then each of these below kind of overrides the previous one. So let's say generally I say font size is generally going to be 12. Okay, so all of the different countries, all of the different websites are using 12, except for when we get to Germany, which needs 14, and Spain that needs to use 8 or 9 or whatever. Okay, so it kind of follows that. Okay, now the order does matter because of this cascading effect. The bottom one overrides the next, and I'll show you an example that I created that I'm just using the W3 schools here. I opened up an example, and basically what I did was I put a link. Okay, if I had other links, it would just go in that cascading style, but I want to show you how various ways of styling also override. Okay, so here I have a link to a style sheet. So this might have font color, right? Color black. Okay. And then what happens is this comes next, so it starts cascading down here and it sees all this styling, the style element, and what it does is paragraph color is now changed to gray. Okay, so gray overrides the black, okay, and turns paragraphs gray. You can see here the gray. And then it keeps going, and here we have inline styling, and inline styling overrides everything else because it comes after all this. Okay, so here in this inline styling, I change my paragraph color to red, and you can see that the red actually overrides the gray, which before the gray overrode, is that the past? Overrode the black. Okay, so cascading first it went black, then it goes gray, and then red, and you can see how things override each other. Other reasons for cascading, for having multiple links to multiple style sheets is, let's say, well, you've probably noticed that when you use your mobile phone, a website looks differently than if you looked at the same website on your computer, right? And that's because your computer browser uses a different style sheet than your mobile phone. How does it do that? Well, I have different links to different types of media. And these media, they call them media queries, are defined in your CSS. So you define the media queries and we say, okay, media screens with this width is going to use this type of styling. Media screens with this width are going to use another one. And then media print is going to use this type of styling. Okay, so what it does is we have lots of different links to different types of styles. So smartphones are going to get one style. When you put your tablet in portrait, it's going to use a certain type of style. In landscape, it's going to use a different type of style. On a PC, it's going to look differently, and on a big TV screen, it's going to look differently as well. So that's another reason why you can apply multiple links to multiple styles, just because on different devices you want your web page to look differently. Okay, and you've probably noticed on YouTube, for example, that when you have a full-size computer, let's see if I have YouTube. No, I don't. But you probably noticed on YouTube, on a big computer screen, you get a whole bunch of videos. You also get like the sidebar with like recommended videos. But when you look at YouTube on your mobile phone, it looks completely different, and that's because it's using a different style sheet.